Captain Jonas Wilder adjusted the visor on his helmet as he stepped off his shuttle and onto the surface of HFY 7. The planet's sky was an unexpected wash of purples and oranges, with twin suns casting eerie, almost mystical shadows across the landscape. Exotic plants with fleshy leaves and swirling tendrils stretched out from dense undergrowth, some glowing faintly in the dim light. Jonas felt the thrill of discovery ripple through him. He traveled across light years, risked radiation storms, and endured solitude for moments like these. The Interstellar Union had invested heavily in this mission, aiming to explore whether HFY 7 could support human life and, more importantly, to see if any local flora or fauna held medicinal properties that could advance interplanetary medicine. As a xenobiologist, Jonas had spent years studying alien ecosystems in simulated environments, but nothing could compare to the raw, unpredictable beauty before him. His handheld scanner hummed in his gloved hand, analyzing the atmosphere, and as expected, it flashed green, breathable with low toxicity. He was officially on his own in uncharted territory. Setting up camp along the edge of a valley, Jonas arranged his equipment meticulously, each piece designed to help him document this new world. His camp was a compact, self-sustaining module that would provide shelter, but the allure of the wilderness called to him. Nearby, odd, spiral-shaped plants rose from the ground, their translucent leaves refracting light into prisms. He knelt beside one to capture a sample, marveling at how its cells resembled a blend of bioluminescence and photosynthetic pigments, like nothing he'd ever seen. Just as he began cataloging his findings, he heard a faint rustle. He looked up, eyes scanning the shadows at the edge of his camp. Then he saw it, a creature unlike any he'd encountered in all his years of exploration. It was an animal with sleek, silvery fur that shimmered in the alien light, with long, elegant legs supporting a feline yet lithe body. Its face, framed by a delicate mane of fur, had a pair of large, golden eyes that seemed almost thoughtful. Jonas was instantly captivated. The creature's 6 legs moved in smooth, fluid motions as it prowled cautiously around the edge of his camp. He whispered into his recorder, cataloging its appearance and behavior, already mentally nicknaming it Spark due to the strange blue tint and a faint, crackling energy that surrounded its body. But Spark's interest wasn't idle curiosity. The creature's nose flared as it picked up his scent, and its tail twitched, sparking faintly with each twitch. Jonas had studied enough alien behavior to know caution was essential. He moved slowly, taking care not to provoke Spark. His heart raced, but he forced himself to focus. Observing a native creature up close was an unparalleled opportunity, but he was painfully aware that its next move was unpredictable. As Jonas continued with his camp setup, he glanced over to see that Spark hadn't moved. The creature's gaze was locked on him, its muscles tense, and he could sense a kind of intensity in its stance. Wanting to give it space, he backed up slowly, inadvertently stepping toward what looked like a a carefully arranged mound of smooth, opalescent stones and what appeared to be organic fibers woven into a small structure. Before he could register his mistake, Spark's demeanor changed instantly. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, and the blue sparks around its body intensified, pulsing with an electric hum. Jonas froze, his breath catching. This was its territory, and he had unknowingly violated it. With a sharp, hissing sound, Spark lunged. Its silvery form blurred as it sprang forward, one powerful swipe of its clawed paw catching Jonas across the arm. A flash of searing pain shot through him, the shock sending him stumbling back. He hit the ground, clutching his arm, blood already beginning to seep through the thick fabric of his suit. The creature growled once more before disappearing into the shadows, its eyes glinting briefly before it vanished from sight. Jonas gasped, fumbling for his emergency med kit as he examined his injury. The gash was deep, red soaking through his suit, and his arm throbbed with an odd electric tingle that seemed to stem from the attack itself. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, a static burn that wouldn't fade, making the injury feel more severe than he initially thought. The pain was sharp, immediate, and unforgiving. Jonas knew he needed to act fast. As he pulled out bandages and a disinfectant spray, he kept glancing at the direction Spark had disappeared, both wary and fascinated. Here he was, wounded by a creature that didn't just defend itself, it left him with a mark that pulsed with an energy foreign to his body. Wrapping his arm in a bandage, Jonas looked up at the wild, vibrant landscape around him, the dense flora, and the strange alien sounds filling the air. This planet was dangerous, he reminded himself. He was light years away from help, and any mistake could be fatal. But as he sat there nursing his wound, part of him couldn't shake the awe he felt. Spark was no mere animal. Its reaction, its calculated decision to strike, was filled with a kind of intelligence Jonas couldn't ignore. He felt a strange, reluctant gratitude for the creature's willingness to defend its territory so fiercely. It had let him live. As he applied the last bandage, Jonas scanned the camp's perimeter one last time, wondering if he'd see those golden eyes again and if he'd learn just how far Spark's curiosity about him truly went. Jonas woke the next morning to a throbbing pain in his arm, a sharp reminder of yesterday's encounter with Spark. He unwrapped the temporary bandage and examined the wound. The deep gashes were angry and swollen, but they held a strange shimmer, as if some residual energy from Spark's claws lingered beneath his skin. The ache wasn't just physical, it carried an unusual prickling sensation that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Jonas had encountered strange injuries before, but this was different, more invasive, more alive. He knew he couldn't rely solely on the standard med kit for this wound. The Union had equipped him with basic antiseptics, clotting agents, and painkillers, but his wound wasn't just a laceration, it seemed like an energy-infused cut that resisted the ordinary healing process. As a xenobiologist, Jonas knew he needed to think outside the box. He adjusted the small data scanner on his wrist, programming it to take samples of his blood and tissue near the wound. A moment later, his display showed the analysis, traces of foreign bioconductive particles. Whatever energy Spark had, it seemed to have left a residual effect in his system, one that was slowing his body's natural healing abilities. With a sigh, Jonas forced himself to stay calm and practical. He couldn't let a wound this severe fester. A clear mind was his best tool for survival, so he decided to search for alternative resources within the local ecosystem. He took his portable scanner and ventured just outside his camp, his eyes scanning the flora he'd briefly cataloged the day before. If he could find a plant with natural antiseptic or clotting properties, it might stabilize the wound. After hours of careful searching, Jonas spotted a cluster of broad-leafed plants with a faint iridescent sheen, growing near a small, reflective pool. The scanner pinged with promising data. The plant was rich in antimicrobial compounds and had a strange molecular structure that suggested it might interact with the foreign particles in his wound. He carefully cut a few leaves, crushing them to extract a thick, green paste, and applied it gently over the gashes on his arm. Instantly, the prickling sensation dulled, replaced by a soothing coolness that seeped into his skin. Relieved, Jonas returned to his camp, but as he settled in, he sensed something: he wasn't alone. He turned, catching a flash of movement on the outskirts of the clearing. Spark had returned, sitting silently in the shadows, watching him with those intense golden eyes. This time, however, the creature's gaze wasn't hostile. It seemed inquisitive, almost as if it were studying him in the same way he had studied it. Jonas held his breath, his heart racing, but he forced himself to remain still. Spark tilted its head slightly, eyes fixed on the makeshift bandage on Jonas's arm. There was a strange intelligence in its gaze, a depth that transcended instinct. Jonas realized, with a jolt, that Spark was interested in how he was treating the wound it had inflicted. The creature's demeanor had shifted from territorial to something far more complex, as if it were grappling with the implications of their encounter. Days passed, and Jonas settled into a careful routine. He continued his research, cataloging plant samples, studying Spark from a safe distance, and keeping meticulous records of his wound's progress. Yet, with every passing day, Spark lingered closer. Jonas often caught it observing him from the edges of his camp, its fur sparking faintly with the same electric energy that had once torn through his arm. It never came too close, but its presence became constant, like a silent guardian or, perhaps, a curious companion. Jonas's wound began to heal, but slowly and with great effort. Each morning, he replaced the green paste made from the iridescent plants, feeling a faint relief from the tingling energy beneath his skin. Spark watched him every time he treated his injury, its golden eyes tracking every motion, every grimace. Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that Spark was captivated by his resilience, by his strange, almost ritualistic process of healing. One evening, after treating his wound, Jonas decided to address Spark directly. He extended his uninjured hand in Spark's direction, palm open in a gesture of peace. "You want to see, don't you?" he murmured, aware that the creature might not understand his words, but hoping it sensed the intent behind them. "It's all right. I'm not a threat to you." Spark hesitated, its ears flicking forward, then backward. After a long moment, it stepped forward, the electric blue sparks along its fur crackling softly as it approached him. It stopped just beyond his reach, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air around his bandaged arm. Slowly, it extended one paw, touching the ground with care as if testing his reaction. Jonas held perfectly still, his hand still outstretched, barely breathing. After a few cautious moments, Spark pressed closer, its nose brushing Jonas's arm with a cautious gentleness he hadn't expected. The faint energy radiating from Spark pulsed against his skin, and for a brief moment, Jonas felt a sensation unlike any he'd known, a blend of warmth and static that seemed to sink into his wound, easing the pain with a soothing hum. He blinked, half in disbelief. Was Spark healing him? The creature pulled back, watching him with its intense golden gaze. The pain in Jonas's arm had lessened considerably, as if Spark had somehow absorbed part of it. Jonas's mind raced with questions, but he held his silence, sensing that the moment was too fragile for words. As the days continued, Spark returned to his camp again and again, each time showing less hesitation. Their silent exchanges grew into an unspoken understanding, a bond forged in curiosity, pain, and, perhaps, a strange form of empathy. Jonas realized that Spark was more than just an alien animal defending its territory. The creature seemed almost invested in his recovery, watching his healing process with the attentiveness of a concerned companion. One night, as Jonas lay in his camp, he dreamed of images that felt both alien and oddly familiar. He saw flashes of Spark's memories, moments of hunting, protecting, and even the sorrow of losing other creatures it had known. In the dream, he felt Spark's confusion and guilt over injuring him, as if the creature's own sense of duty conflicted with its instinct to protect its territory. Jonas awoke with a start, realizing that this connection wasn't one-sided. Somehow, Spark had reached into his mind, sharing fragments of its past, its feelings, its regrets. The creature that had once been his aggressor was now something much more, a bridge between two worlds, united by a wound and the effort to heal. He looked over to see Spark lying just outside the entrance of his camp, its body curled but alert, keeping watch over him. In that moment, Jonas understood that Spark hadn't simply come to observe him. It had come to understand him, to learn as he healed. And he, too, felt a surge of gratitude for the alien companion who had chosen, against all odds, to stay. The bond between Jonas and Spark grew deeper, each day bringing new moments of silent understanding and shared curiosity. Spark, once a wary observer, now approached Jonas with a calm, almost gentle demeanor, never showing the territorial aggression of their first encounter. And Jonas, his wound gradually mending, marveled at how the alien creature seemed to not only observe but also empathize with him. As Jonas monitored his arm's slow recovery, he noticed the wound behaved unlike any human injury he'd encountered before. The tingle left behind by Spark's electric claws persisted, a pulsing, lingering energy that even his makeshift remedies couldn't entirely erase. It was as though the injury had a life of its own, as if the residual energy from Spark's attack had embedded itself in his cells, binding them together and sparking the healing process in an entirely foreign way. One afternoon, while inspecting the plants he'd gathered, Jonas felt a sudden flare of pain shoot through his arm. He doubled over, clutching the bandaged wound as the pulsing intensified, filling him with a strange warmth that bordered on discomfort. As he steadied himself, he felt a presence at his side. Spark had approached him, sensing his pain, and without hesitation, it moved closer, placing a paw against his injured arm. Jonas froze as the creature made contact, its silvery fur crackling with a gentle electric hum. He felt the odd, tingling warmth of Spark's energy sink into his wound, dulling the pain as if the creature were somehow neutralizing the residual charge it had left behind. Spark's golden eyes held his gaze steadily, as if to reassure him, and Jonas felt the pain dissipate into a manageable ache. When Spark pulled back, Jonas looked down to see the wound more settled, the inflammation reduced. He reached out to Spark, touching its paw in thanks, and was surprised when he felt a surge of warmth and a flash of images, glimpses of a memory, not his own. In his mind, he saw fragments of Spark's past, other creatures like Spark, sharing territory, surviving in the harsh wilderness of HFY 7. He felt moments of Spark's emotions, a motherly warmth toward other creatures, followed by flashes of loss, as if it had once known companions who had perished to wounds or sickness it couldn't heal. There was a lingering sense of sadness, an understanding that death was part of its world, and a guilt that seemed connected to Jonas, a creature it had injured but hadn't been able to heal in the same instinctual way. Jonas blinked, the vision dissipating, leaving him breathless. He realized Spark was sharing its memories with him. He'd never experienced anything like it, and the profound sense of connection struck him. Spark, a creature so foreign, felt remorse for having injured him, and in its own way, was doing everything it could to help him heal. They were bound now, two beings from different worlds, connected by a shared struggle for survival. Over the next several days, Spark grew even bolder, accompanying Jonas on his daily excursions to gather plants and document local species. It would guide him away from certain areas, nudging him if he came too close to plants with toxic properties or silently leading him toward herbs he hadn't yet discovered. Spark seemed to know the land intimately, and Jonas, for all his scientific knowledge, found himself learning from it as though from a mentor. One day, while they were exploring a glade of shimmering, pale blue ferns, Jonas stumbled upon a low, vine-covered shrub with thick, dark leaves. The scanner's analysis showed that the plant contained compounds capable of coagulating blood and reducing inflammation, something he knew could help stabilize his wound. He looked over at Spark, who watched intently as he examined the shrub. With Spark's silent encouragement, he carefully gathered a few leaves, mashing them into a paste and applying it to his arm. As the soothing sensation spread across his wound, Jonas glanced at Spark and saw something he hadn't expected. Its eyes softened, almost as if it were pleased or proud. The creature's intensity gave way to a silent understanding. Spark seemed to recognize his progress, not only in healing but in adapting to the alien resources of HFY 7. That night, as they rested by the campfire, Spark lay near Jonas, closer than it ever had before. Jonas felt the warmth of the flames, and, beside him, the quiet hum of Spark's energy. Drifting into sleep, he was enveloped by more vivid images, ones that seemed to blend with his own dreams. He saw himself through Spark's eyes, a strange, determined creature, patching up its own wounds with clumsy yet persistent methods, unwilling to give up despite the pain. He saw Spark's confusion and curiosity toward him, and even a flicker of admiration. But underlying it all was a deep-seated memory, a younger, weaker Spark, watching helplessly as a fellow creature succumbed to a similar injury. The guilt Spark felt seemed rooted in a desire to prevent another life from suffering the same fate. When Jonas woke, he saw Spark watching him with a level of attentiveness he had come to expect, but still found remarkable. He reached out, laying his hand on the creature's head, and for the first time, Spark didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into his touch, and the static energy between them seemed to soften, a bridge connecting two beings who understood each other's pain. Later that morning, Jonas finished wrapping his wound with the new paste, feeling stronger than he had since the injury. As he adjusted his gear, Spark moved beside him, no longer merely an observer but a companion. Jonas knew he wouldn't have survived this ordeal without Spark's presence and guidance. The creature had taken on the role of protector, not just because of guilt but out of a strange, profound empathy that defied its wild instincts. As they continued exploring, Jonas realized that Spark wasn't just a native animal reacting to his presence. It had begun to learn from him, just as he had from it. Spark seemed fascinated by his persistence, by the way he tended to his wounds, his ability to adapt despite his frailty. In some way, Spark was testing the boundaries of its own understanding of life, bridging a gap between its instinctual world and something that was becoming more than survival. At sunset, Spark approached him again, this time closer than ever, and emitted a soft, almost musical hum. The sound was different from the crackling growl it had given during their first encounter. It was gentle, soothing, a sound that resonated through Jonas's mind, filling him with calm. He realized this was Spark's way of showing approval, of expressing something close to kinship. Looking up at the alien sky with its twin suns sinking below the horizon, Jonas felt the weight of his mission in a new light. He had come to HFY 7 expecting to study, to observe, and to catalog, but he was leaving with something far more precious, a connection to a creature that, against all odds, had understood him, helped him, and accepted him. In that moment, with the hum of Spark's song filling the evening air, Jonas felt something in him shift. He no longer saw HFY 7 as just another planet, a hostile terrain to be endured. It was a world of its own life and mystery, and he was honored to be a part of it, even if only for a fleeting moment. He looked at Spark, whose golden eyes reflected the last glimmers of sunlight, and felt a gratitude that words couldn't capture. They were two beings from distant worlds, separated by language, biology, and every measure of existence, yet somehow, through shared pain and understanding, they had found a way to bridge the gap. As Jonas continued his work on HFY 7, his bond with Spark deepened, their interactions evolving from cautious curiosity to something that felt strikingly like friendship. Spark was no longer a silent watcher on the outskirts of Jonas's camp. It was a constant companion, guiding him through the dense, alien landscapes and teaching him the rhythms of this mysterious world. Together, they navigated the strange terrain, Jonas with his scanner and tools, Spark with its keen instincts and intimate knowledge of the land. Jonas's injury was healing well now, aided by the local plants and Spark's curious ability to neutralize the remaining static energy that still pulsed faintly through the wound. Each time Spark came close, Jonas felt the residual pain dissolve, as if the creature's energy dampened the charge left behind by its claws. Jonas understood this as Spark's own form of healing, a gift that defied explanation, yet one that had saved his life. One morning, after weeks of mutual discovery, Spark approached Jonas with an unusual urgency. It nudged him toward the forest, its golden eyes conveying a sense of urgency. Trusting his companion's intuition, Jonas followed Spark deeper into the thick underbrush, marveling at how the creature moved fluidly through the dense foliage, barely disturbing the plants around it. He struggled to keep up, feeling an increasing sense of anticipation as they delved further into the uncharted parts of HFY 7. Eventually, they reached a clearing bathed in the amber glow of HFY 7's twin suns. The air here was thick and humid, filled with the mingling scents of strange flowers and ancient trees. At the heart of the clearing stood a large, tree-like organism, its bark shimmering with colors that shifted like waves. Jonas had seen nothing like it in his time on the planet. Spark approached the tree, emitting its low, musical hum, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the tree's bark. Curious, Jonas activated his scanner, and as he approached, the display revealed something astonishing. The tree's sap was rich with compounds that could accelerate cellular regeneration and provide intense antimicrobial protection. It was a natural marvel, potentially capable of transforming human medicine. As he began gathering samples of the sap, Jonas looked at Spark, who watched him with an almost knowing expression. This discovery, he realized, was no accident. Spark had brought him here, leading him to one of HFY 7's most precious resources, a gift beyond his wildest expectations. He understood then that this world held secrets that even his most advanced technologies could barely touch, a world of interconnected life where every creature, every plant, held knowledge honed over countless generations. Spark had entrusted him with one of these secrets, a gesture of trust and understanding that humbled him deeply. For hours, he worked to extract samples, carefully storing them to bring back to the Interstellar Union. Spark remained at his side, a silent guardian, observing his every move. Jonas realized that Spark had not only brought him to this place as an act of trust, but as an invitation to truly understand the delicate balance of its world. When the samples were safely secured, Jonas felt a bittersweet ache at the thought of leaving. His mission was nearly complete, and his return to Earth was scheduled within the next few days. The connection he'd formed with Spark was rare, the kind of bond that defied boundaries, yet he knew it was one he'd soon have to leave behind. As he packed up his camp for the final time, Spark stood quietly beside him, its golden eyes following his movements. Jonas felt the weight of the departure, an ache that went beyond simple sadness. Spark, who had first injured him and later healed him, had shown him a side of HFY 7 that few, if any, humans would ever see. It was more than a companion, it was a part of this strange, beautiful world, a world that had welcomed him and taught him resilience, connection, and awe. The day of his departure dawned in hues of vibrant orange and pink as the twin suns rose over the horizon. As Jonas readied his shuttle, Spark approached, its demeanor more somber than he had ever seen. The creature seemed to understand that this was goodbye, its gaze holding an intensity that conveyed more than words ever could. Jonas knelt, placing a hand gently on Spark's head, feeling the familiar hum of its energy beneath his fingers. He wondered if Spark felt the same bittersweet loss. "Thank you," he said softly, knowing that Spark might not understand the words, but hoping it sensed the gratitude behind them. Spark nuzzled his hand, a gesture so gentle and deliberate that Jonas felt his heart ache. The creature emitted a low hum, one that resonated deep within him, filling him with a sense of warmth and farewell. As he climbed into the shuttle and prepared for takeoff, he saw Spark standing at the edge of the clearing, a solitary figure against the vast alien landscape. The engines roared to life, and as the shuttle rose, he looked down, catching a final glimpse of his friend. Spark's golden eyes followed him, a silent witness to their strange, improbable friendship. As HFY 7's landscape shrank beneath him, Jonas felt the weight of their bond settle heavily within him. He knew he would carry this connection, this shared understanding, with him always. Spark had given him more than survival, it had given him a glimpse into the heart of a world beyond his own, a world of kinship and resilience. Back on Earth, the scientists and officials celebrated his findings. The samples he brought back held groundbreaking potential, compounds that could accelerate healing, bolster the immune system, and transform medicine. But when they asked Jonas about his greatest discovery, he found it hard to put into words. How could he explain the bond he'd formed, the intelligence and empathy he'd encountered in Spark? In the quiet of his debriefing, as he watched the sunset over Earth's familiar horizon, Jonas closed his eyes and saw HFY 7's alien landscape, heard Spark's soft, musical hum echoing in his memory. He realized that his connection with Spark was a discovery all its own, a reminder that even across light years and differences unimaginable, understanding and kinship were not bound by species, nor by worlds. And as he sat there, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His journey to HFY 7 had changed him in ways he could never fully explain, but he knew one thing with certainty: he had met a friend, a kindred spirit, on a world far from home. And he would honor that friendship by ensuring Spark's world would remain protected, a place of mystery, beauty, and life, forever untamed and unknowable in the best way.